Recitative. Pronunciation. Recitative. Recitative.
Recitative.
Recitative. Recitative. We do have quizzes. What's this? Workshop. What is this? What do you mean? I don't know. Well, I don't understand. How would I know where? But where is the register code? But I don't. Ah! Oh, no. What? Eight or nine alphanumeric characters. Well, I just don't know. How do I know? Hello.
Hello.
We have only a couple of you thus far. Julius is trying to join, but it's not going well, apparently. I'm so frustrated. I'm supposed to be able to, like, this is the book we're supposed to use, and I'm supposed to be able to get all these free LitWeb tools, but I have to register, and it's like telling me that I have this particular code, but I don't know what the code is. I don't know where to find it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, it's too many numbers. I don't know what to do. Also, this thing's just told me that my internet connection is unstable, so that's fun. I might get thrown off. We'll see. This has been such a weird day. Like, earlier I thought I was a vampire, and I know that's a weird way to start a sentence, but I didn't realize that my camera had frozen, and I was like out of my chair. And then when I came back, I wasn't on the camera. It was just my empty chair. And I was like, guys, I'm here. And then just a few minutes ago, I was like looking down. I was like looking at a book, and Mr. Stover came in the room, and he was literally right in front of me before I knew he was here. And I was like, oh my God, he scared me so bad. So I don't know what's going on today. It's just a weird day. Well, where is everyone?
Well, I think Kayla's doing something.
Oh my God, is that today?
I don't know what it was, but
that was today. Yep. And I know that Sarah will not be here. I don't know where Madison might be. Let me go ahead and mark Kayla present and Sarah because I know where they are. Madison, I don't know about. Maybe she'll show up. Sometimes she's late. I'm working on putting together a calendar for us. I'm like halfway there, and that's half of why I was like trying to find my registration code here, because if I had more resources, I could better plan out our weeks. But like, it wants you to look at all these workshops, but we don't have access to them if we don't register this book. It's really annoying. Okay, so we're just going to go through a few things together today to kind of set us up for success. And I'm going to there's an introduction to literature quiz that I'm going to have to look at, because I might have y'all take that on Friday, but maybe not. Okay, so everything we're going to look at today is in the content section of D2L, and it is under week 1, part 2. There's another little drop down menu that says lectures about fiction, quoting, and the first essay. We're not going to look through everything today, but we're going to look through a few things. And the first thing we're going to look at, and I'll share my screen with you guys in just a minute. Oh, here comes Madison. Yay. Let me get her attendance changed here. I was just saying, Madison, that we're going to look through a few things together today, and everything we're looking at is under content, under week 1, part 1, and then drop down even further, lectures about fiction, quoting, and the first essay. I'll go ahead and tell y'all, I apologize. This first week is going to be like the most boring week, because we're kind of getting the preliminary stuff out of the way. We don't come to school on Monday, do we? Shoot, I just forgot about that.
Why?
It's a holiday, some kind of holiday. President's Day?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, President's Day. It was scheduled as like a weather makeup day if we had weather, but we have not had weather. I mean, we've had weather, but not inclement weather. You know what I mean?
Which was like shocking.
It's so shocking. With everything else that 2020 threw at us, I thought in September we would have like the hurricane to end all hurricanes. And
yeah.
It's bizarre. So I got to rethink the schedule a little bit. I guess I should go through and mark all the days that we don't have school. at some point. I don't know how many more like e-learning and stuff that we have. This is February, right? Okay, so we have an e-learning day this month. We have an e-learning day every month. We've got a couple of early release days. So I just got to kind of remember that. And then we'll have, in May, we'll have Memorial Day off. Okay. Figure that out. I just thought about that. But I do, for the most part, have like a weekly schedule set up that will last as long as we're doing short stories. I'm not sure that it's going to be able to last into drama or poetry, but we'll see. Poetry will be a short unit anyway. Okay. And speaking of short stories, I'm going to share my screen with you guys and you can follow along. It might seem early to do this or to talk about this, but the first thing I want to talk about actually is the first essay that we'll do. We're not doing it yet. We won't do it until kind of towards the end of our short story unit. But I want to go ahead and just kind of run through this so you know, like as we're reading stories, you sort of know what you're looking out for. I gotta minimize this so I can see it all. Well, there we go. Sometimes I can like shove this over, but for some reason I can't today. Okay, so when you write this, you're going to be choosing one of the short stories, and this first essay is going to be at least 800 words long. It should not have any outside research. So that sort of makes this easy in a way because you don't have to do tons of research and stuff. The focus of this paper is to prove that you have a working knowledge of the literary terms and devices that you learned about in the lectures. And by lectures, I kind of just like there's sort of like supplementary material for each story, and we'll go through that and it'll sort of point out a lot of different literary devices and give us some ideas for how to analyze the stories. So that's what we'll kind of focus on. You'll have 4 topics to choose from. The first one is sort of based around character. You'll answer the question of whether a character from one of the stories is round or flat and static or dynamic, giving proof for each assertion. I don't know if you guys remember what those things mean because it's been a little while, but hopefully you do, and we'll definitely go back over it. And you obviously have to give proof for those assertions and also what's their motivation for their actions or behaviors. The second one, what's the life lesson, aka theme of the story? And you'll need to use details from the story to prove that theme. This is a reminder that I feel like no matter how many times I say this in different classes, it just never gets through for some reason, or very rarely gets through. A theme has to be more than one word. You can't say that the theme of something is love or family or revenge or anything like that. What's the message about that thing? And we'll have some notes about that. Analyze it, probably tomorrow actually, we'll look at some notes about that. Analyze a symbol used in the story. There's definitely going to be some stories that have some really cool symbolism, which I'm very much looking forward to, and stuff that you might wind up wanting to write about. Fully explore how it's used literally in the story, what it means on a deeper level, and why the author chose that particular symbol. I can tell you right now, that's the one I'd write. And option 4, how does the point of view affect the story? In other words, what's the author teaching readers by choosing this point of view? Is the narrator reliable? I'm already thinking of one story we're going to read that would be great for that one. So as we start reading stories next week, be thinking about those things, the characterization, the themes, the symbols, and point of view. I'm not going to go through all this stuff with you right now because by the time we write the essay, you will have forgotten it anyway, but it's basically just like formatting stuff. This is worth mentioning, particularly because you've gotten so much information this week in your other classes about late work. That doesn't really apply to this class because it's not Allegro grading, it's Trident grading. So there's no late work on this one. If your paper's not in the assignment folder by the due date at 11:59, it will not be accepted. Obviously, if you get into an accident and have a concussion or something and have to go to the hospital, tell me and I will open the assignment back up for you. I'm not a monster. But for the most part, there's no excuses for late work in this class, which most of you found out very well last semester. We'll go back over this again too, but this is kind of how it'll be graded. Formatting, works cited, if that's a thing. In this one, it's not. Thesis, quotes, correctly cited, and it's all just like organization, that kind of stuff. Okay, and at least 800 words. So let's look a little bit more about literary analysis essays anyway. This is something that for the last couple of years that I've taught this class has been kind of confusing to students just because you really haven't written a literary analysis paper before. And I feel like a lot of times people kind of overcomplicate it. Especially considering the fact that most of you have spent the last year and a half writing really like analytical, factual kind of papers. And this is analytical, but it's a little bit more creative. Or maybe that's just my opinion because I really like writing about fiction. So as a composition course, this class is obviously going to concentrate on writing, but that's a really vague description because there's so many different types of writing, journalistic writing, business writing, technical writing, creative writing. Our focus is going to be on essay writing, obviously, because it achieves two goals: thinking critically and thoroughly communicating ideas. And I mean, even though we've been writing different kinds of essays over the last year and a half, every kind of essay we've written requires those two things: thinking critically and thoroughly communicating ideas. There's obviously a lot of types of essays, so we're going to concentrate on analytical essays, and it's you providing your interpretations of literary works. A lot of these essays are often more challenging than personal essays since they require more than a reflection of your own experiences, or reports, since reports only really recount facts rather than provide interpretations. But again, this is something that particularly those of you who were in AP are going to be able to do pretty effectively because you know how to build your own argument, but use evidence to support it. So all analytical essays about literary works contain a central argument, and the purpose of this argument is to persuade your reader that your ideas about the literary work are valid. Again, really similar to every other type of essay we've written, because you always have a central argument. You're always trying to persuade your reader that your ideas about whatever topic you're writing about are valid. You're also working, and this is where it differs, you're also working to help your reader better understand a play, short story, or poem. In fact, that's the reason that your reader is reading your essay, to gain a clearer sense of the ideas an author conveys in his or her play, story, or poem. So to effectively analyze a work, you need to address not just what happens in a work, but what these events mean. Kind of think about that. Maybe this is just like my English teacher brain working, but it makes me think of rhetorical analysis essays, because you're recognizing the patterns that are occurring, but not just stating that they happen, explaining why they're happening and what the effect is. So similarly, in a literary analysis essay, you're not just going to summarize or describe the events in a play or story or poem. You do need to describe those things, but you have to go a step further and explain the ideas that the writer conveys through depicting those specific situations or characters in the way that they do. I like this. That is the true challenge or mind-crushing frustration of analytical essays. So the lectures on the writing process, which we'll look at tomorrow, I don't know. We'll look at them though, are designed to help you understand the requirements of analytical essays in terms of content, structure, style, and mechanics. In order to understand this process, you will need to read all of the lectures, and a lot of it will be like we're reading them out loud together so that we can, talk about questions and so that I can kind of guide you through them and help you understand them better. And we'll refer back to those. So in brief, too late. To write well, you must work to make your essay clear, thorough, and hopefully interesting. I feel like if a literary analysis essay is done correctly, it'll be interesting. Clarity is the first objective because without clarity, nothing else matters. If the reader can't understand what you say, the reader cannot evaluate your ideas. And this is something I'll talk about more when we start writing, or maybe next week, because we'll have our first prompt about a story. But just kind of focusing on not overcomplicating the way you say things. Some of these ideas might be sort of complicated, but your writing doesn't have to be. And now I'm going to be a huge English nerd and quote Ernest Hemingway at you, because those of you who did, if you guys remember, I think y'all hated doing this, but last year in AP, we did that Hawthorne versus Hemingway thing where you had to take the words of one and write them again in the style of the other. So you might remember that Hemingway is known for like short sentences, very like clear and to the point because of his journalism background. And in a book that I read one time, I remember reading this novel of his and highlighting it because I thought it was so important. He said, know how complicated it is and then state it simply. I think that's such good advice because sometimes if we think that an idea is really complicated, we feel like we have to express it in a complicated way, and we don't. That just makes our interpretation of a complicated thing complicated, and then it's going to be really hard to understand. So know how complicated it is, but state it simply. So clarity relates to both style and phrasing and to the organization of the essay. And the lectures that we'll look at will help you with content and organization issues. And there are lectures in the grammar section, which I suppose we'll look at. I'm just thinking about schedule stuff. You don't have to worry about when we'll look at it. We'll look at it. Thoroughness relates primarily to content development. To fully develop your content, you must specify your ideas and interpretations, provide evidence for your assertions, analyze the evidence you provide, and explain your ideas to the reader. The lectures on essays, structure, and quotations address issues related to thoroughly presenting and exploring your points in the essays. And finally, to make your writing interesting, you need to be interested in your writing. And, it's hard for me to think that y'all might not like any of these stories. Like, I think y'all will like most of these stories. I'm sure you'll all have like a least favorite one, but I've read all of them except for one. And the one I haven't read is by the same author who wrote Beloved. And we AP kids read that last year. So I have high hopes for that one. And they're all really good and interesting and fairly easy to read. That's not to say they're not kind of convoluted. There are definitely some that are sort of convoluted. But it's so much more interesting to read a thing that is written by someone who cares about it. Similarly, it's a widely known teaching trick, or not a trick, a fact, that teachers who are excited about their content tend to get their students more involved in it. Genuinely, like, don't tell him I said a good thing about him, but I think that's one reason that Stover is such a good teacher, because he's so excited about math all the time. And math is not that exciting, but I've sat in on his classes, I've observed him, and like, I feel like I could handle it, like, I feel like even though I suck at math, he is excited enough and like invested enough that it makes it a little bit easier. And God knows that, y'all know perfectly well how nerdy I can get about English stuff. So same kind of concept. If the person who's talking or writing is excited about what they're talking or writing about, it's going to be a lot more interesting to read. So if you feel a genuine interest in your subject, your reader can detect that enthusiasm. If you don't feel a genuine interest, then that's going to come across as well. Neither writing nor rigorous critical thinking comes easily to most people. and you're going to be combining both in a semester's worth of work. So it'll be challenging, but with commitment and curiosity, should prove to be a very fruitful semester. I like that. I think it'll be fun. Of course I do. So the last thing that we're going to look at today, and I know we have plenty of time in class left, but particularly also with like half our class meeting. What? Okay. My apartment complex just sent me a thing earlier that was like, hey, your renter's insurance is not valid. And I was like, yeah, it is. Here's my proof. I don't know. So dumb. Okay. Interpreting and evaluating literature. I'm going to have to, I mean, I know that y'all all have these resources on D2L, but I'll make sure that everybody knows that they can go back and look at this and hear me explaining it. So when you're interpreting, what that means is you're exploring the possible meanings. The meaning of a literary work is created by an interaction between the work and the reader. And this is not really part of what we have here in front of us, but I've definitely told you guys in previous classes that I hate to say the author's intent doesn't matter. Of course it does, but it's not everything. Like it says, the meaning of a literary work is created between the work and the reader. And because of that, if you come up with something, like if you think it means something, even if it's not what the author actually intended, if you can back it up with evidence, then it's real. Like that's a valid opinion, which is one of the cool things about English, because I don't want to say it can be BS, it can't, but you can interpret it in so many different ways. As long as it can't be BS because you have to back it up. But if you have the evidence from a text to support what you're saying, then your interpretation is valid. The work provides the facts, the attitude of the writer, and the literary conventions of the genre or time period. And we do have a bit of genre or like period pieces. I think our earliest one is like turn of the century, which is also nice because we're not looking back at like, well, actually I have an option to do a Hawthorne story, but I don't think I will. We'll see. If we do, Hawthorne will be our oldest one. The rest of it will be like 20th century. What you, the reader, bring. This kind of plays into what I was just saying. Literary works and how you interpret them will be affected by your personal perspective. And it's hard to really delve into that super far before we have examples. But for instance, I think about like psychology and emotions a lot, and I tend to read stuff through that perspective. If there's a lot of people who are like in literary circles, there are a lot of people who take sort of a feminist perspective to everything they read and interpret it through that lens. It's just gonna, like, how you interpret something is gonna be affected by how you look at the world. Nearly every work can be interpreted differently by each person based on his or her experiences, beliefs, assumptions, backgrounds, etc. Again, for instance, if you have a religious background, then some of the stories are going to really look different to you than they do to somebody who has no religious background, just because you have a different lens to look through. And we do have a couple of stories that have like some religious themes, motifs, maybe. Because every reading is an interpretation, it's a mistake to look for a correct reading. And that's kind of what I was getting at before. The author was thinking one thing when they wrote it, and the thing they were thinking might be really complicated, but that doesn't mean it's the only way to interpret it. I think probably throughout the course of history and throughout the course of literature, we've probably come up with a lot of symbolism that people didn't really intend. They're just like, oh, well, that works out. Like a lot of symbolism and themes and everything else are what the author intended, but sometimes we're just putting our own interpretation on it. And as long as we can defend that, then it's cool. Speaking further to that, like a scientific theory, an interpretation must have a basis in fact, and the text supplies the facts against which your interpretation should be judged. That's basically just saying you do have to be able to defend what you're saying. You have to be able to back it up with textual evidence. Keep in mind that some interpretations are not reasonable. You might contribute ideas based on your own perspectives through gender, ethnicity, culture, religion, whatever, but you can't ignore or contradict evidence in the text to suit your own biases. For instance, I'm trying to think of something that we might have all read. You couldn't take Beloved, for instance, and be like, this is definitely a more modern retelling of Romeo and Juliet. Like, it's just not, and there's nothing you can really say to back that up or defend that. You're just kind of pulling something out of thin air at that point. But if you can kind of back it up, for instance, some people think that The Lion King is an interpretation of Hamlet. And if you know everything about Hamlet, you can definitely see there are ways that you can defend that. If it's there in the text, then cool. But you cannot ignore or contradict evidence in the text to suit your own biases. In this class, you shouldn't only try to decide whether a work is good or bad, but also whether it's effective in terms of its purpose. What is its purpose? Entertainment, enlightenment, education. In fact, I think trying to decide whether it's good or bad is sort of pointless because there's not a universal criteria to determine that. There's definitely going to be some stories that I think are really good that y'all don't care for, or that some of you don't care for. That doesn't mean that I'm right and it's a good story, or that you're right and it's a bad story. Just means that we have different interpretations of it. And the more important thing is, what's its purpose and is it effective in terms of that purpose? And there might be works that you don't enjoy reading, but you may be able to appreciate the purpose, the craftsmanship, or some other aspect. I don't care for William Faulkner, but I recognize that his work is good. Like, I know why other people like it, I just don't. So things to consider when you're evaluating literature: how do the literary devices function within the work? Does the author make good decisions? I would also say, do those literary devices change the meaning, or do they, like, how heavily do they affect the work? Does the work reinforce your ideas, or does it challenge them? I love a work that challenges my ideas. It's always infuriating, but I really like it. If a story can make me question my own viewpoints, that's cool, that's powerful. Is it intellectually challenging or too obscure? Is it worth your time? And that's hard to answer. You might feel like it's not worth your time. I'm not recommending this to you because it's definitely like kind of adult, but I listened to this podcast that I might have mentioned before in this class, actually, called the Drunk Guys Book Club podcast. And it's exactly what it sounds like. But at the end, like, they look at a book each episode, and at the end they always say, who should read this book? And I like that because they really analyze, like, does everybody need to read this? Probably not, but who would appreciate it? Whose time would it be worth? Is it not worth it because it's too sort of, obscure or more intellectually challenging than you want it to be? Or is it maybe not worth your time because it's just crappy? And I really appreciate that they do that, because I definitely listen to ones where I haven't read the book that they're talking about, and I sort of take their opinions about who should read it to decide if I want to read it. So that's cool. And that's it for all of that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen with you guys. There are more, there's more information in that same little spot that we were looking under the, come on. Sorry, my screen's being weird. The lectures about fiction quoting in the first essay. There's more stuff. We'll look at some more tomorrow. Like I said, this week is not going to be the most stimulating. It's a lot of me talking, to be honest. But next week we'll really get into some stuff that hopefully y'all will be pretty engaged with. Any questions about any of that stuff? Any thoughts? Do you feel intimidated? Do you feel excited?
I have a question, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So on the assignments,
Mm-hmm.
it said you said that like all the due dates are wrong.
All the due dates are wrong. I changed the due date for the pets assignment and the attendance verification quiz. So those should be right.
Okay, so all the other ones where it says January
None of them are right.
21. What the heck? 12:30 a.m.?
Well, you know, college students tend to stay up all night and do work. So
Okay.
yeah, none of that stuff is right. Maybe once I have a better map kind of planned out, I'll go through and change those due dates, but I wouldn't expect to see any of that stuff change this week.
And then the quizzes, they look right.
Do they?
Yeah. Does
Are
that
they-
mean they're open and we can do them?
Well, you're not going to have the information for most of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they're like reading quizzes and stuff.
Oh,
I see. They're like available to be done.
it also says 11:59, which is new.
That is new. I noticed that the other day. Last semester I could only make it 11:30. I don't know why. And I don't know if you guys can see like a weird little symbol beside it. I can. I
No.
think I don't actually know if you can get into them or not. I don't even know which ones y'all can see and which ones you can't. I should also go in and hide all of them.
Oh, it says you must meet the conditions before you may attend this quiz.
Okay, good. And I don't know that I'm gonna actually, I might change that because the conditions are like, you've read the lectures and we might be reading them together. So you might not actually like click on it yourself. And I don't want that to prevent you from being able to take a quiz.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see what you mean, that like they're all like available until April 19th, 2021. But you
Yeah.
don't have the info to do any of these yet, except for attendance verification quiz. Anything else?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Well, I'm gonna let y'all go for today then. Again, sorry this week is just a lot of me talking, but we gotta get a lot of the stuff out of the way first. Eventually, we'll all talk.
Ooh. Fun.
Our discussions in this class are fun sometimes. Okay, well, I will see you guys tomorrow.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.